Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Today, Coach's Corner, Curvive Coach's Corner, is going to be a real special one. One of the, college coaching, among the ranks of college coaches, there are certain men that you develop relationships with. And today we're going to be talking with UVA, University of Virginia head coach Chris Pollard. And Chris, I really, first and foremost, I know it's very, very busy this time of year, but I want to say thank you for being so generous with your kind here today. Time here.
Absolutely, Walter. Appreciate you having me on.
One of the things that I would like to start off with is, when you're leaving a program like Duke and going over to UVA, you're staying within the ACC, but, UVA has a special kind of piece within your heart with regard to Virginia. Can you talk a little bit about that, that moving from one school to another and what that means to you as a coach, but more importantly, you as the husband and the father within a family?
Sure. Well, 13 years at Duke, it's a special place. We had, deep roots in Durham and a lot of great friendships. So it was going to take a lot for us to ever leave Durham. But Virginia was always one of the schools that was on a very short list of places that, we could see ourselves relocating and sort of settling down. As you alluded to, this is a homecoming for me. I grew up in Central Virginia. I grew up just 45 minutes down the road from Charlottesville. And so, I grew up a UVA fan. I go all the way back to the days of Terry Holland and Ralph Sampson. And, I bumped into Ralph Sampson a week ago here in Charlottesville, and I was like a 7-year-old kid again. And, so that, I'm thrilled to be back in the heart of the Commonwealth. Thrilled to be back closer to family. It's a program that's steeped in tradition. It's a beautiful college town. It's a wonderful world-class university, and so there's a lot of things to be excited about here at UVA and with UVA baseball.
So one of the discussion points that I feel that, we as adults, when we're interacting with younger student athletes, we all want to talk about those buzzwords like name, image, and likeness and portal and things like that. But to some degree, they've been around college athletics, albeit with the exception of the collective, for many, many years. What do you think what's the one area of college athletics that parents and student athletes need to be keenly aware of that may not be changing? We had COVID, and that was kind of a temporary flush of athletes and extra years of eligibility. But do you feel like this brand of college baseball is kind of here to stay?
It is, and I think if you said what's one thing that families need to be aware of, if you're a parent of a 2027 or a 2028, I was asked 2 days ago at our prospect camp by a parent. They said, is this logjam going to come to an end? Right? You had COVID, then you had MLB contracting the draft. Then you had the House settlement, which reduced roster sizes. And, I think a lot of families feel like, when is this going to come to an end? Like, when are we going to get back to sort of having some, some space for high school players to go and commit? And the reality is it's going to get worse, not better. And I just was on the phone, Walter, a few minutes before the podcast. And one of the things that came up in that call was the Major League Baseball draft. And we're now getting ready to start negotiations on a new collective bargaining agreement. And I think it is very likely that the Major League Baseball draft, is about to go from 20 rounds to 10 rounds. And all of a sudden, you're going to see, 10 times 30, 300 less opportunities in professional baseball. That pushes the talent pool down even more. That's another 300 less opportunities at the highest levels of college baseball. And it just keeps pushing that talent downstream, which is awesome for Division II, Division III, and NAIA baseball. Those levels of baseball and college baseball in general have never been better, but it is very frustrating, as you and I talked about before the podcast a little bit, very frustrating for the families of 2027s and 2028s that are trying to find a home.
One of the things that I have always tried to discuss with parents is that college coaches have more tentacles in the water than you think. It's not just prospect camps. It's not just, evaluation at high school games or tournaments and so forth. There's a lot of ancillary ways that college coaches gather information with regard to future student athletes that may be a fit within your program. I would love for you to talk and discuss about, I think high school families really believe that recruiting is still high school athlete versus high school athlete. But in reality, a 2026 or even a 2027 is competing against an athlete that may currently be in college. And can you talk a little bit about the synergy video and the value that allows college coaches to kind of, when it comes to evaluating potential fits within their program, and why parents need to be more cognizant of that as an avenue that coaches are with regard to evaluation?
Sure. I think you make a great point. I think not only is a 2026 or a 2027 grad competing with his fellow classmates or other high school players, and they're competing with uh, 20, 21, 22, in some cases 23 and 24-year olds for those final few spots on a 34-man roster. That's what makes this so difficult. College athletics has never been older, and now you have fewer spots to go around, and so that makes it more difficult for a 17 or 18-year-old. You alluded to synergy. There's just never been more information out there to track on players. It's not like 10 years ago where you might just go to the website and see a guy's statistics and try to make a determination based off of the stat sheet. Nowadays, you've got a volume of data, you've got a volume of video, and so you're able to make better determinations. You're able to make more informed decisions just because there's so much more information at our disposal.
One of the things that I think catches a lot of student athletes off guard when they begin to get into that senior year and they begin to look at college athletics is the day-to-day volume of commitments, meaning it's not just a baseball practice after school. It starts really the night before, whether it's with a meal prep or making sure you get the night's sleep. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects the incoming freshman classes, both when you were at App State and Duke and now UVA, as far as really preparing with regard to time management skills over and above baseball skills?
No, it's incredibly important. It is something that we stress a ton with our high school commits. The value of understanding and really diving into what process looks like, right? You mentioned meal prep the night before. Brandon Geyer, who is the CEO of Major League Mindset, such a talented guy, a former UVA baseball standout, former MLB baseball standout, and now has his own mental performance company. He talks all the time with guys about, hey, a good day starts the night before, and understanding the process that and preparation that goes into having a great routine. We talk all the time, and I talked about it this past week, and we talk all the time about the three foundational elements of your performance: how you sleep, how you eat, how you hydrate. And like we get as a sport, and certainly high school kids get so caught up in, what's my long toss routine? What's my velo development routine? What's my bat speed routine? And I told guys, like, if you're getting 4 hours of sleep a night, if you're putting junk in your body and you're dehydrated, it doesn't matter how good your lift routine is or how good your velo development routine is. You're not only not going to get better, you're probably going to get hurt. And so understanding and prioritizing nutrition, like you said, meal prep is such a huge part of that. 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night, making sure that you're drinking plenty of water and avoiding too much caffeine and too many energy drinks. Like all these things are foundational to your performance.
One of the aspects of the new roster size, which we've college baseball, for those that may not remember, college baseball at the Division I level was always 35 or in that ballpark. So going back to 34 is kind of going back pre-COVID. But one of the things I would love for you to discuss is, the role of the bench player, or, you can only put 9 out there. So understanding your role going into college and excelling in that role is a critical part of being an underclassman on a college roster. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Okay, we're all former, all stars and all state and all region, but when we come into a program like UVA, we're going to have to work to get between the lines, and we have to be prepared that when we do get between the lines, we're ready for what awaits us.
No question. And versatility's never been more important. When you
Right.
have the truncated roster, you're going to see a resurgence of the two-way player in college baseball. The Houston Streets of the world are going to become so much more valuable in today's 34-man roster. But it goes beyond two-way players. If you are a versatile defender, that allows you an opportunity to have a positive influence on the outcome of a game, and to have a role that you bring to the table. If you are a great base runner, right? Like the little things that guys don't necessarily think about. And yeah, I understand like the old adage, you can't hide bats on the bench. Right. I mean, and guys, it's always been universal in our sport. If you hit enough, coaches are going to figure out a way to put you in the lineup. But that being said, that guy that's a great base runner, that guy that's a great bunter, that guy that's a great defender and is versatile, can play multiple positions, those guys are going to become incredibly valuable in this smaller roster.
One of the topics you just brought up there, base running. I was in Texas this weekend with Tyler, and I spoke to a couple of coaches, and they were talking about now more than ever, the speed slash base running component. And we were talking in reference to one of the games within the World Series. Base running is often overlooked and underappreciated as an athlete and as the family of that athlete. That we're talking about metrics and velocity and exit velocity and all the talk a little bit when you're out evaluating or you're watching video and you're evaluating. Talk a little bit about that with regard to the speed and the base running technique, and why that is so important and critical in today's game at all levels of college athletics.
Well, I think you can make a compelling case that base running cost the Toronto Blue Jays the World Series, right? I mean, and so there were three um, obvious, avoidable base running blunders in
Right.
that World Series, and the Blue Jays played tough and they played hard and they're talented. And I was pulling for them. I was pulling for Ernie Clement, who's a former UVA standout, and I was pulling for my former player Joey Loperfido, who was also on that World Series roster. But just I will tell you, Walter, that base running is the most undertaught and underappreciated part of our sport right now, right? It without question, and it has such an impact on wins and losses, especially when you get into the postseason where the margin of error is so much smaller. The margin between victory and defeat is so much smaller. You're not going to rely on guys just to hit balls out of the ballpark. You're going to have to do the little things. You saw that in an incredible game 7. And so just, yes, speed is so valuable. Jim Gant, who was an absolute legend, still is in our sport at Catawba College, ABCA Hall of Famer, and 1,000 wins. And I learned so much from him during my time coaching at Pfeiffer University. He would always say, speed never takes a day off, right?
Right.
Like, your hitting takes a day off sometimes. It's just our sport, but speed never does. But on top of that, just an understanding of base running and putting yourself in the right position and understanding when it's the right time to go first to third, understanding when it's the right time to be aggressive, taking an extra base or trying to steal third base. and those free 90s, they add up, and especially in 1 and 2 run ball games. And it just, I feel more and more, and I hear this across the board. Um, you know, Guys just aren't being taught those things, and you can see it showing up now in the highest level of our sport. And I think as coaches, we've got to increase our emphasis on base running. We've got to create more accountability in base running, because it's just such an important part of winning the ball game in a small margin, type of 1 run game.
Yeah, I want to kind of digress slightly because, in today's world, you have your prospect camps, and I interact with a lot of parents, and you hear this frustration, and it always comes back to my high school coach doesn't do this, or this guy doesn't really care. At the end of the day, all coaches care, some more than others, but they all care. And you have to work within a certain margin of guidelines that you are presented with every single year. You do have some voice with regard to when those get implemented, how they get implemented, as far as the changes within the NCAA. But you're for the most part, college coaches have to play the cards that they are dealt. Can you talk a little bit about how that can be a little frustrating for coaches? And obviously, it's frustrating for families, but what would you suggest that parents and athletes begin to understand moving forward with regard to college baseball, as far as A, how to best prepare, and B, how to make sure you have the best experience possible as a 19 to 23-year-old?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're all bound by time limitations, right? So
Correct.
high school coaches would love to have more time with their kids day in and day out for development purposes. Travel coaches see their guys on the weekends, and it's in a lot of cases games only. And we're limited in terms of the number of hours that we have our kids per day and per week. And what I tell players, guys get caught up a lot in the physical side of preparation. What I find when guys get to the Power Four level, the struggle tends to be more with managing the mental side of the game, and the approach side of the game versus the physical. You look at some of our 18-year-old freshmen out there, and you put them beside a 21-year-old junior or a 22-year-old senior, physically they look the part, the arm strength, the foot speed, the bat speed. It's the struggle is in managing their day to day. And so it's understanding process and routine, and what does my pre-practice routine look like? What does my process in the evenings look like to get ready for the next day? Like 22-year-old seniors are really, really good at that. And that's something that guys walk into college struggling with. Um, but a bigger issue for me, Walter, is the concept around having a growth mindset and really understanding what it means to lean into failure and to lean into adversity. I think that's where that player making the transition to the college level really struggles, because the reality is throughout their amateur baseball career, they have by and large been one of, if not the best player on the field. And so they're very used to having a lot of success. They're not used to struggling, and they get to the college level and they're no longer the best player on the field, and they're struggling, and immediately they go to a place, well, something must be wrong because this has never happened before. And part of what we have to do with young guys is just really reframe how they look at failure, to understand, hey, failure is how you grow. Failure is how you get better. And so the more you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? The more you can step outside your comfort zone. And so our challenge to our commits is, hey, you got to start doing that now. You can't wait
Right.
till you get to the University of Virginia to start getting uncomfortable, because at that point, man, things can really speed up on you. we challenge our guys, take a few minutes every day and find a way to get outside your comfort zone. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. I challenge guys like, hey, if you don't make your bed in the morning, well, wake up and make your bed every morning. If you're a guy that likes to hit snooze, well, like, get up the first time the alarm goes off and challenge yourself to not hit snooze. We have a mental performance app that we use with MLM, with Major League Mindset, and one of the aspects of the app is you can track how many days that you're successful with your mental skills challenge. So you can track how many days in a row you didn't hit snooze. You can track how many days in a row you made your bed. You can track how many days in a row that you spoke up in class and were involved in class discussion. All things that I think a lot of times are uncomfortable and inconvenient for players, but all of a sudden, David Goggins likes to say, callous your mind, right? The more you do
Right.
something that's uncomfortable, the easier it becomes. And so, that's a big way that high school players can really help themselves get ready for college.
I'm going to sneak this next to last question in here. I just want you to offer your personal thought on this. Jonathan Santucci, a lot of times when I'm talking with parents, I will tell them, there are separators that occur before or prior to college. And one of them is, this post grad world or these boarding school worlds that kind of allow athletes, students more appropriately, to kind of understand the process of having a roommate, being away from home, that type of thing. Can you talk a little bit from a mental perspective, not just skill set perspective, but the mental perspective as far as becoming a college student, the value that offers for? So I know Billy Wagner coaches at a school down in Virginia. We up here have Phillips Exeter, Phillips Andover, Deerfield. Talk a little bit about that's kind of becoming a part of this process, and what type of value do you see that when Jonathan rolled into your campus at Duke that played for him as far as assimilating into the Duke program?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Tucci, one of my favorite guys of all time. Special kid, special family. That that ability to take that, where you call it a gap year, or
Yeah.
whether you spend that year, or even your junior and senior year of high school in that environment. What it does, Walter, is it challenges you to get comfortable with some of those things that you're going to have to be comfortable with as a freshman in college. You mentioned living with a roommate, right? That takes getting used to,
Right.
and so you have a chance to develop that skill of sharing a room with somebody that you didn't know before you showed up there on campus. But I think also what it does is it forces guys to have to do things for themselves. I think we're all guilty nowadays as parents. We want the best for our kids. And in some cases, that leads to us doing things for our kids that we should let them do for themselves. And I'm guilty of that as a parent. I know a lot of other parents, if we were honest, would say, yeah, I'm probably guilty of that too. When you get away on your own, whether it's a gap year or as a boarding student, what it does is it forces you to have to do some things that mom was probably doing for you.
Right.
And I told our group that was here this past weekend, I said, hey, like, start doing things for yourself, because when you get to college, mom and dad aren't going to be here to do them for you. The mom's not going to be here to check your email for you. And so that process allows guys a year or two to start developing those skills of just being on their own and really having that independence to be self-sufficient and self-motivated.
Final question, Chris, and I really you've kind of offered a lot of these bullet points, but I want you to kind of speak to those families, those athletes, particularly of the 27, 28, and obviously 29 is in the mix, but a little bit of ways. They got some runway ahead of them. What should they be really focused in on when it comes to, trying and working hard to become a college student athlete? whatever level it might be, what are some of the tips that you would give them to be working on a regular basis?
Sure. I tell players and I tell families, like, it's never too early or too late to really focus academically, right?
Amen.
If you're an eighth grader and you're taking Algebra 1, I always say you're already on the clock, right? Because that's going to show up on your high school transcript. If you're an 11th or 12th grader and you don't love your freshman and sophomore year academically, I college admissions counselors love a good story. They love a good comeback story. And so if you can show a positive trajectory over your junior and senior year, college admissions counselors love that. The flip side of that is they hate the downward trend, right? The A student as a freshman who turns into an AB student as a sophomore, who turns into a B student as a junior, that feels like that student athlete's going in the wrong direction. That student that was a B student or a BC student as a freshman, that's now an A student as a junior, that's a great comeback story, and college admissions officers love that. I just can't stress enough to families to be open to all realms of college baseball. My oldest son is playing Division III baseball now and having an amazing experience. And so I've seen firsthand like how good of a college baseball experience there is out there at the Division III level. I think we're about to see an explosion of junior college baseball across the country. And so, somebody said to me recently, yeah, but my son's really academic. I said, well, go look at some of the Ivy League schools that have junior college transfers in their program right now. My great friend Brett Beretti has
Yep.
been awesome at bringing junior college players into Columbia, and those guys have a lot of success. So junior college is not for the non-academic prospective student athletes, for everybody. And so just that openness to all different college baseball experiences. It's not about one place. It's about finding the place that's the best fit.
Well, I want to say thank you, Chris. I know this is an extremely busy time of year and we're broaching up on the holiday season. So I want to say happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays to you and your family.
You
And
too.
I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, I always enjoy catching up with you, Walter. Thanks for having me on.
Athletes, electrolytes matter, but you got to choose the right electrolytes. If you look at the sugars, 34 grams, the dyes, all the things that's not good for you in this product, this is a hype product. If you look here at the electrolytes made by Corvive, it's got the right amount of magnesium, sodium, potassium, zinc, kosher salt. It's got vitamin C to help with the immune system. I'm telling you, if you want to stay on the field, you want to perform at your best, you want to recover well, this is the product that you need to choose to fuel your body as an athlete.